Tonight's story starts with an anniversary dinner and a gift so cruel the whole restaurant goes quiet. But that moment is only the beginning of what really unfolds. Stick around to the end, and if you enjoy stories like this, hit subscribe for more. Marcelli's was the kind of place that dimmed the lights just enough to make you feel like something important was happening. I was already on my second bourbon, not because I needed it, just because I knew what was coming. My name on the reservation was Rowan Collins, even though my actual last name is Hale. That little detail was Larkin's idea. She said it made things easier when we dined here. Translation: her family liked to pretend I was one of them. Across from me, Larkin sat in a silver dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent before we got married. She looked bored in that high-gloss, sculpted kind of way, like someone at a photo shoot she couldn't walk out of. On either side of her were Eleanor and Graham, her parents, the real heads of the table, even when we were in public. You'd think they were hosting a strategy session, not an anniversary dinner. Eleanor talked loud enough for half the restaurant to hear, dropping client names from Collins' advisory like she was performing a monologue. Graham checked his watch every couple of minutes between lazy sips of red wine. Not a single word about me or us, just the firm, the market, strategic optics. Quick note: before listening, share which city or country you're watching from, and let's continue. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. Just one word from Jessa. Ready. Mara was nearby, waiting. I gave the slightest nod. Then Larkin tapped her glass. She stood, flashed that fake proud smile I used to think was real, and said, "To freedom, solitude, and the thrill of looking again." Clear, sharp, cruel. A couple at the next table turned their heads. I caught one of them raise an eyebrow. Then Larkin reached under her chair with a little smirk and pulled out a black gift box. She set it in front of me like she was passing over a folder at work. No emotion, just a transaction. I already knew what it was. I'd seen the receipt 2 weeks earlier. Still, I opened it. Charcoal gray cap, clean embroidery, right across the front. 5 years of disappointment. Eleanor let out a soft, amused laugh. Graham gave that tight-lipped smirk he saved for when someone lost a deal and didn't know it yet. I didn't flinch. I set the cap down on the table, slow, deliberate, then stood up and raised my glass. My hand was steady. My voice hadn't hit the room yet, but I could already feel the silence coming. Right before I spoke, I looked around at the table, then thought back to how all this started, when I still believed I'd married into a family, not a project, and then I raised my glass higher. I didn't make a sound when I set the cap down or raised my glass. I just held it there, letting the silence stretch. But the real start of it, the unraveling, wasn't at that table. It was months earlier, back when I was still 33 and still dumb enough to think I'd married into a family that just had different values, not different rules. Larkin had been coming home late, more and more, always with that smooth excuse, something about an institutional client, always framed like it was for us, like missing dinner or falling asleep mid-conversation was some shared sacrifice. I tried to believe her. I wanted to. We'd worked so hard to make things look right on paper. Married 5 years. Nice house, decent careers. We were supposed to be building something. But the nights got quieter. Jokes we used to throw back and forth during takeout turned into little performance updates. She'd walk in, drop her bag, and say, "Next Tuesday is the Women in Capital dinner. You'll come, right?" I'd nod, not because I wanted to go, but because it was easier than arguing. The last time I tried to ask where we were headed, us, not the firm, she just stared at her phone and said, "You don't want me to blow this for us, right?" In bed, it was more of the same. She'd roll away with her phone lit just enough to keep her face in shadow. If I reached for her, she'd mumble something like, "I'm too wired," or "maybe tomorrow," like affection was another bullet point she didn't have time to deal with. Then one night, over some frozen ravioli we barely spoke through, she looked up and said, "Don't worry about the anniversary this year. I'll handle it. Actually want to surprise you this time." Her tone was light, but the way she said, "reset," right after hit me sideways. I smiled anyway, told her that sounded great. Inside, something curled tight in my chest and stayed there. 2 weeks later, I was in the laundry room, flipping through pockets before starting the wash. Habit, nothing dramatic. Until a stiff piece of paper slid out of her navy blazer and landed near my shoe. I bent down and picked it up, already feeling off. It was a receipt. Charcoal cap, white embroidery. 5 years of disappointment. Ordered from some boutique downtown. Dated the exact night she told me she was trapped in a late portfolio review. I sat down on the floor, back against the dryer, that strip of paper still in my hand. My heart wasn't racing. It was something colder than that. I read the words over and over until they stopped being clever and started being what they actually were. A message. A joke I wasn't in on. I didn't storm upstairs. I didn't shout. I didn't even tell her I found it. Not that night, not the next. Instead, I stood up, folded the receipt into my wallet, and made a decision. If she was treating our anniversary like some company roast, I wasn't going to warn her that I'd caught on. I was done pretending. I needed to get out of that house and start seeing what else she'd been slipping past me. So the next morning, I left early, told her I had a meeting. And for once, I didn't say where. I didn't go back home after that fake meeting. I ended up at a little cafe near my agency called Maple and Ink. Wobbly tables, slow Wi-Fi, no pressure to order more than a black coffee. It was quiet, low risk, the kind of place no one from Collins Advisory would be caught dead in. Most days I'd sit in the back corner with my laptop open, pretending to work on slogans for real estate or skincare or whatever we had on the books that week. But the truth was, I was mostly watching other people talk, laugh, argue over nothing, watching couples who didn't flinch when their phones lit up, watching people who hadn't built their lives on someone else's script. After about 2 weeks, the same server started showing up with my usual order before I even said a word. Coffee, splash of cream, turkey sandwich, no tomato. She wore a faded name tag that read Jessa in Sharpie, and she always had her hair up in a messy bun with a pencil jammed through it like a pin. Rowan Hale, right? She asked one day after setting down my plate. You used our Wi-Fi. It shows up on the login. I nodded, curious where this was going. She gave a small smile and said, Maple and Ink's my day shift. Nights and weekends, I work another spot for extra cash. I didn't press, but I made a mental note of it. Her tone had changed, like she knew something. A few days later, she hesitated before handing me my sandwich. Can I ask you something? She said. Hale, right? Rowan Hale? Yeah. Does your wife's family run that investment firm that always books the back corner at Marcelli's on Sundays? My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice even. Collins Advisory. Yeah, that's them. She nodded slowly, like that confirmed something for her. I wait tables there weekends. I've served them. Eleanor, Graham, your wife. Larkin, right? And a guy named Declan, not all at once. They take turns, like they're careful not to overlap. She glanced around the cafe, then lowered her voice. They talk like you're not in the room. They were laughing last weekend about some anniversary surprise. Said it was brutal, but hilarious. Eleanor joked you'd probably clap for it. I didn't move, didn't say a word, but my jaw clenched so hard I had to stretch it after. Sorry, she added. I only know your name because I heard Eleanor say it. Something like, Rowan will just nod along. He still thinks this is his big upgrade. I looked at her, really looked this time. She wasn't trying to stir up drama. Her eyes were steady, voice calm. Why are you telling me this? She shrugged, then said, Because if it were me, I'd want someone to warn me. I pulled out my wallet and gave her a tip that was honestly more than I could afford. She didn't react, just nodded once and walked away. On the way back to the agency, I couldn't stop replaying her words. Not just the part about the surprise. The other thing, Declan, the rotating dinners, the way none of them ever showed up together. Larkin hadn't just checked out of our marriage. She was choreographing the exit, a full production. That's when I knew being angry wasn't going to be enough. If I wanted to survive this, I needed receipts, and not just the kind you find in jacket pockets. Back at my desk with cold coffee and a browser full of half-finished work, I opened our joint banking portal for the first time in months. I wasn't expecting to find anything dramatic. Maybe a few charges from boutiques, some overpriced skincare or private fitness memberships. But what I saw stopped me mid-scroll. There was a pattern, not in one chunk, not obvious, but steady, transfer after transfer, small enough to seem routine on their own, quietly piling up into an account with only Larkin's name on it. Over the span of 2 months, it totaled more than I'd make in a full year at the agency. It wasn't just sneaky, it was methodical. I stared at the screen for a long time, then picked up my phone and called Noel Pritchard, the family's financial advisor, the guy who used to slap my back at parties and call me smart for marrying up. He answered with that smooth country club cheer. "Rowan, good to hear from you. Everything okay?" "Just doing my due diligence," I said, trying to get smarter about our strategy. "Larkin's been moving some funds around?" "Oh yes," he said quickly, like it was totally normal. "She mentioned she was arranging a surprise investment, something creative and long-term for you both. Told me not to spoil it." My gut clenched. Right, that sounds like her. He rattled off the numbers like he thought I'd be impressed. I thanked him, wrote it all down, then hung up and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't a surprise. It was a parachute, and I wasn't invited. I made a call that night to a divorce attorney named Corinne Baxter. Got her name from a friend who'd survived a messy split with a local real estate guy who'd tried to hide his cash in art deals and fake debt. She was sharp, brutal, and came highly recommended. We met in her office 2 days later. Tidy space, quiet confidence. She didn't waste time with small talk. "What do you have so far?" she asked, already pulling a legal pad. I laid it all out. The receipt for the cap, Jessa's warning, the dinner schedules, the transfers Noel confirmed. Her pen stopped halfway through my story. She leaned back. "They're not just discarding you. They're positioning you." "For what?" I asked. "Depends what they need. Blame, leverage, a distraction." Then she told me what I needed to do. Copy everything I could legally access. Bank statements, screenshots, open emails on the family laptop, calendar overlaps, anything that showed coordination. She gave me a USB drive and told me to keep it off cloud services. "And don't react," she said. "No accusations, no scenes. Keep playing the version of you they think they're handling." That part stung, but she was right. Larkin wasn't afraid of the man I'd been. She was counting on him to stay quiet. Over the next few nights, I stuck to the script. Ate dinner across from her while she talked about networking events. Nodded when she reminded me to RSVP for some gala. Meanwhile, I was sliding statements into a private email and backing up every open message or file I could find onto that drive. It wasn't hard. Larkin had stopped seeing me months ago. She didn't notice when I spent an extra hour in the den, or when I started keeping my laptop bag zipped tight. The more I gathered, the clearer it got. This wasn't just a slow-motion breakup. It was a setup, and I still had no idea just how far they were planning to take it. Saturday morning, Larkin left for a strategy offsite at some vineyard outside the city. I waited exactly 10 minutes after the door shut before heading to the storage room. On paper, I was just digging for old tax returns, the kind of boring due diligence Corinne had drilled into me. But I had a feeling there was more in that room than outdated wage forms. The metal filing cabinet groaned when I pulled it open. The top drawers were what I expected. Tax folders, mortgage documents, printouts from some donor database tied to Eleanor's charity. I went through everything slow, making sure I didn't miss anything tucked in the wrong place. Then I hit the bottom drawer. There was a box labeled Collins Family, Eleanor's handwriting tidy and sharp like it belonged on a check. I lifted it out and placed it on the carpet. Inside were photo albums wrapped in tissue paper and a few yellowed clippings from local papers, ribbon cuttings, black tie events, plaques, and scholarships. Larkin showed up in almost every frame, grinning in private school uniforms or posed stiffly next to Eleanor in velvet and pearls. But that's not what stopped me. It was the other girl, same age range, maybe a year or two older, dark hair, sharper smile. Every other page had her, labeled things like Mara, 2002, or Mara and Larkin, Fall Festival. Same last name, same house, same childhood. I flipped back through the album, confused. In all the years I'd known Larkin, she'd never once mentioned a sister. When I asked about family, she'd say, "It's basically just my parents now," and shut it down like the subject annoyed her. At the very bottom of the box, folded between two laminated award programs, was a business clipping, Collins Advisory to expand regional operations. Graham's photo was in the center, beside him, in smaller print, Mara Collins, Chief Financial Officer. There was a whole paragraph on her degrees and awards, and then nothing. No more pictures, no wedding announcement, no job updates. It was like someone had hit delete. I took a few photos with my phone and walked next door to Alma Hensley's place, muffins in hand, using the excuse that they were extra from the batch I'd baked for the agency. Alma had lived on the block longer than anyone. She knew the entire neighborhood's history better than city records. Over tea in her quiet living room, I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the photos. "I found this going through old albums," I said. "I didn't know Larkin had a sister. Thought it might be a fun surprise for her. You remember Mara?" Alma stared at the screen for a few seconds, then her expression dropped into something softer. "Oh yes, I remember Mara very well. She was the smart one, thoughtful, always talking about books and school projects. Used to visit me with her dog sometimes." "What happened to her?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Alma set her teacup down carefully. "Far as I know, the family decided she didn't exist anymore. There was some kind of blow-up about money at the firm. Mara found things she wasn't supposed to find, said she'd report it, then, poof, gone. No more holiday cards, no mention at all." "She told you this?" "Back when we still talked, yes," Alma said. "She wasn't angry, just tired. Hurt, I think, more than anything. Said they erased her like she was a misprint." I thanked Alma for the tea, walked home slow, and went straight back to my desk. That name, Mara Collins, had just moved to the top of my list. I didn't even get up from the couch. I opened my laptop, typed Mara Collins, financial consultant, into LinkedIn, and there she was, older than the photos, but the same sharp jawline, same eyes as Larkin, just colder, professional headshot, private connections. She looked like someone who didn't make small talk unless there was a reason. I messaged her from my personal account. Nothing dramatic, just said I was married to Larkin, that I'd found her name, and that I had a feeling I was dealing with the same kind of silence and manipulation she'd stepped away from. I told her I wasn't asking for anything, just perspective. She replied the next morning. Her message was short, polite, and careful. She suggested a meeting spot in a city about an hour out, early, quiet place, coffee shop near a commuter rail stop. Said it wouldn't draw attention from anyone on her client list. When I walked in, she was already there, corner table, back to the wall, watching the door and the sidewalk through the window at the same time. She stood, shook my hand, and said, "You look like the guys my parents invite to things and then talk about later." I half laughed and said, "That's probably because I am." We sat. I laid it all out. The receipt for the cap, the transfers I tracked, what Jessa overheard at Marcelli's, the way Eleanor talked about me like I was a coffee table she'd overpaid for. Mara didn't interrupt. She just listened, eyes never leaving mine. Then she said my name, not like she was checking if she remembered it, but like she'd decided I was real enough to use it. "Rowan," she said. "That's exactly the pattern. Charm until they own you. Pressure until you break. Then they pretend you were never there." She pulled a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. "These are original partnership agreements from the early years. I was written in with a sizable minority stake, real signatures, legal documents." I flipped through and saw her name next to Graham's, dated, stamped, clear as day. "They updated the records a few years later," she said, "after I found irregular transfers and refused to keep quiet. Suddenly, I didn't exist anymore. They even hired someone to scrub the internal systems. These," she tapped the folder, "are the reason they haven't buried me completely. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the folder. So I'm not crazy. No, you're just late to the game. We talked for over an hour. She told me about her consulting work now. Small clients, clean books, no more games. She didn't say it with pride. It sounded like someone listing survival strategies. She admitted she missed holidays, missed their old dog, said she hadn't heard Larkin's voice in over 5 years, not since the day she walked into the boardroom and said she was done pretending. "Why'd you meet with me?" I asked. "Because if you're willing to stand up to them, you shouldn't have to do it alone." Driving back, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel scared either. I just felt clear. I'd seen what happened to the last person who tried to hold them accountable. Now I needed to figure out how not to be next. After that meeting with Mara, I called Corinne as soon as I got back to the car. Told her everything. She barely let me finish before saying, "You need a forensic accountant. I'll connect you." 2 days later, I was climbing a narrow staircase above a bike shop downtown to meet Rena Kwan. Quiet voice, steady presence, and the kind of woman who looked like she could ruin someone's decade without raising hers. Her office smelled like old paper and printer toner. She didn't offer coffee, just motioned for me to sit. I handed her a folder with our household financials, Noel's call notes, and copies of the original partnership agreements Mara had shown me. She didn't ask questions, just started flipping through like it was the most interesting thing she'd seen in months. 3 days later, I was back in that same chair, notebook in hand. She clicked her pen twice, then looked up. "Your wife," she said calmly, "has been rerouting funds out of your joint investment accounts. The destination is a trust tied directly to her parents' holding company. Your name isn't on it." I stared at her. "How long?" "At least 7 weeks, possibly more. The transfers are masked as rebalancing transactions, which is common, but the beneficiary account is private. That's where it changes." She turned a page and pointed. "There's also something else. Donations sent from Eleanor's charity, consistent withdrawals over time, which then show up as deposits in a separate vehicle managed under Collins' advisory." She paused. "That loop? If regulators notice it, someone's going to prison." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. She kept going, voice low but firm. "Mara also gave me access to some of her old files. I found a draft memo from the Collins legal team. It references a potential misappropriation incident. They call it a risk, and it names a junior spousal signer as the fallback exposure." I already knew what that meant. "Me," I said. Rena nodded. "Did you sign anything related to the foundation?" "Yeah," I said. "Larkin had me sign some copy for a gala brochure, said it was for print approval." "That was probably the trigger form," Rena said. "Enough to establish your name on the account, at least in the paperwork trail. It was a setup, not just to dump me, but to leave me holding the bag if someone ever came asking about the money. The press release would call it unfortunate. Larkin would call it heartbreaking. And I'd be the one sitting under a headline. Corinne had me print everything, Rena's summary, the memo draft, screenshots from my joint account history, and label each file with the date and location I'd received it. She wanted a clean record that showed I hadn't just figured it out. I'd acted. Meanwhile, I met with a realtor, Calder Moss. He was all business, didn't ask questions, just walked the house like it was already half sold, and quietly drafted a listing agreement. It would need both signatures, but wouldn't go live until I gave the word. A week later, Larkin was half watching a true crime doc and answering emails when she handed me a stack of flagged papers to review and sign whenever. I slid Calder's authorization form right in the middle. She initialed exactly where he'd marked. That night, I drove out to the edge of town and unloaded a couple boxes, old paperbacks, family photos, my grandfather's watch, into a storage unit that didn't belong to them. The message hit my phone while I was parking outside a grocery store. Unknown number, short and weird. "Are you the Rowan married to Larkin? We need to talk, somewhere public, for everyone's safety." I was about to delete it when another line came through. "Look, I'm Declan. I work with your mother-in-law. We need to talk before they hang both of us out to dry." I texted back one word. "Where?" We met an hour later in a food court off the highway, one of those echoey places where no one looks up and everything smells like fried salt. Declan was already sitting, hands folded on a tray with a coffee he wasn't drinking. I slid into the seat across from him, facing the opposite direction, like we were in a bad spy movie. He didn't waste time. "I've been seeing Larkin," he said, voice low. "You probably already guessed that." "I had help," I said. "Jessa, and your name came up." He nodded. I deserved that. Then he reached into his coat and slid a small folder across the table, along with a thumb drive. "I overheard Graham and one of the firm's lawyers last week. They were talking about setting up a fall guy, a disposable assistant if it got messy." "Let me guess," I said. "I'm the fall guy." "Yeah, you and me both, maybe." They said if regulators started sniffing around, they'd blame Rowan's sloppy oversight and Declan's mishandled reporting. I opened the folder just enough to see the headers, email printouts, internal notes, dated and stamped, the kind of thing Rena would eat for breakfast. "You're giving this to me, why?" "Because I don't care about Larkin anymore," he said. I was naive enough to think I mattered, but I am not planning to be the one blamed while they golf through it. I looked him straight in the eye. "I can't promise you protection, but if this is real, I'll hand it to Mara's lawyer and Rena. Your name won't be the first one on anything we file." He nodded once. "Good enough." That same afternoon, Jessa texted me an audio clip, just under 30 seconds. She said Eleanor and Larkin had come in early that Monday, rehearsing something, laughing like they were prepping a show. I put on headphones and hit play. It was Larkin's voice, clear as day, saying, "He'll probably smile and try to make us feel better about the cap. That's how he is." Then Eleanor laughing, "He might even toast us." My stomach turned, not because I was surprised, but because I finally had it. The kind of proof Corinne had been waiting for, their words in their voices. That night, I uploaded Declan's files, Jessa's clip, and the original draft memo about the embezzlement setup into the shared drive Rena created. By morning, everyone had what they needed. Corinne, Mara's legal team, Rena herself. Signed letters to the oversight board and court were ready to drop Monday. Only thing left was their little show at Marcelli's, and deciding exactly how far I wanted to take the script out of their hands. That morning started with coffee in bed. Larkin set it down beside me like she was delivering room service. "Happy 5 years," she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "We actually made it." If I hadn't known better, I might have thought it meant something. She stood in the doorway, robe tied tight, and added, "Dinner's at 7, Marcelli's. Don't make us late. My parents have done a lot for us." When she stepped into the shower, I reached for my phone and opened my email. The message from Calder was short. The buyers accepted. The closing would go through as soon as both sellers finalized the packet, which meant the deal was basically done. She just didn't know that the boring paperwork she rushed through last week had been the final piece. I logged into the joint account one last time, transferred exactly half, not a penny more, into a new account across town, typed short-term allocation in the memo and took a screenshot for Corinne. Clean. Documented. Around noon, I sat on a bench in the park near our house, dialed my mom, and for the first time in months, told her what was going on. She didn't interrupt, didn't say "I told you so." She just said, "You cannot build your whole life inside someone else's plans and still expect it to feel like your own." Mara texted just after. She was already in the city, checked into a small hotel a few blocks from the restaurant. She had the original partnership agreements printed and prepped. Her suit was simple, gray, nothing Collins approved. Rena followed up a few minutes later. The regulatory complaint was queued and ready to go. Her report on the trust transfers, the foundation donations, and my signed affidavit about the signer setup. First thing Monday, it would hit the oversight office and court at the same time. Around 4, I stood in the closet staring at the charcoal suit Larkin had picked for me last week. I almost left it hanging. Then I decided that if this was going to be a performance, I might as well wear the costume they chose. Larkin barely looked up on the drive. She was scrolling, texting, reading something with that shallow smile she used at networking events. Probably checking with Eleanor about the timing. I watched the houses blur past and realized I didn't feel a single thread connecting me to that home anymore. It was a shell with granite counters and lies in every drawer. When we pulled up outside Marcelli's, Larkin smoothed her dress and said, "Smile, please. You always look mad in photos." I smiled, just not for her. Inside, the maitre d' led us to the usual corner, the one they always requested. Graham was already sipping something brown and expensive. Eleanor was mid-wave, calling to one of the servers like she owned the lease. She looked me up and down, gave a nod of approval. "You clean up well," she said. I sat down across from her and felt something I hadn't felt since this whole thing started. Calm, cold, ready. Larkin stood with her glass raised and that glossy, rehearsed smile locked in place. "To freedom, solitude, and the thrill of looking again," she said loud enough for the next table to catch every word. Then she pulled out a sleek black box from under her chair and pushed it across the table like she was handing over a signed contract. Inside was the cap, charcoal, embroidered in white. 5 years of disappointment. A few people actually chuckled. I set the cap on the table, stood up slow, tapped my glass once, and waited for the noise to settle. "I'd like to raise a toast," I said, "to the Collins family for teaching me more about disappointment than I ever thought I'd need to know." Eleanor shifted, about to speak, but I pulled out my phone and hit play. Jess's recording spilled into the space, Larkin's voice first, laughing. "He'll probably smile and try to make us feel better about the cap. That's how he is." Then Eleanor's. "He might even toast us." The table went still. A couple near the wall turned around and stared. Eleanor's face froze, and that social smile cracked for the first time all night. "I'm not surprised by the cap," I said calmly. "I saw the receipt weeks ago. Since then, I've moved my half of our money, opened a separate account, and signed a sales agreement on the house, the one you both thought I was too stupid to protect." Graham leaned forward, sputtering. "You can't sell our house." "You're the one who insisted I be on the deed," I said. "Both owners signed. Paperwork's filed." I turned back to the table. "Larkin's been seeing Declan for months. I have receipts, screenshots, and emails, copies, all ready with my attorney." I took a breath. "But that's not what matters most. What matters is that I found the draft memo calling me the junior spousal signer in case anyone looked into the foundation transfers, along with emails between Eleanor and Graham discussing how useful it would be if I looked desperate." Then I looked toward the front of the restaurant. "There's someone else who deserves to be here tonight, someone I wasn't told existed during the entire 5 years of my marriage." Mara walked over in a gray suit, calm as ice. She nodded to me, then to her parents, and placed a folder on the table. "I still legally own a significant share of Collins Advisory," she said. "I'm filing suit for being erased and a complaint over the same financial transfers you thought you buried." I raised my glass one last time. "If you want to label someone a disappointment," I said, "start with the mirror." Then I set cash on the table for our half of the dinner and walked out with Mara, leaving behind the cap, the performance, and their illusion of control. In the months that followed, Corinne called with updates on settlement talks. Rena's report kicked off a state-level investigation. Noel called to say he was sorry, said he should have seen it coming. Mara and I opened a small consulting firm. She handled numbers. I wrote for clients who didn't lie for sport. And for the first time, I wasn't part of anyone else's script. Before you click away, ask yourself this: would you finally walk away from someone rewriting your life? Tap hype to support this video, like, subscribe, and comment your opinion.